Now's the time for a great deal on a new Honda. Check out the Honda Prologue, Accord Hybrid, or Civic Hybrid. For a limited time, well-qualified buyers can get a 0.99% APR on a 2025 Prologue, a 2.99% APR on a 2025 Accord Hybrid, or a 4.99% APR on a 2025 Civic Hybrid.
See dealer for financing details. Exclude Civic Si and Type R.
Lowe's knows that no matter your paint or stain project, saving is at the top of your to-do list. Save now with buy one, get one half off select paints, stains, and primers from top brands like Valspar, HGTV Home by Sherwin-Williams, and Cabot via Visa gift card rebate. Find more Memorial Day deals now at Lowe's. We help, you save. Selection varies by location. While supplies last, discount taken at time of purchase. See sales associate for details. Offer valid 5/15 through 5/28.
Welcome to True Crime Garage. Wherever you are, whatever you are doing, thanks for listening. I'm your host, Nick, and with me, as always, is a man who only bets the Reds to win. Here is the Garage Player Manager, the Captain.
And if I lose, it's double or nothing. It's good to be seen and good to see you. Thanks for listening. Thanks for telling a friend.
Today, we are still sipping on some Betcha from Sonder Brewing. This is a hoppy and hazy New England IPA. It's about as solid as they come, very traditional, and the right amount of tropical fruit that removes any of the bitterness. Garage grade 4.5 bottle caps out of 5. And let's give some thanks and praise to our good friends for helping us fill up the old garage fridge. First up, a cheers to Kyra Crum from Nineveh, Indiana.
And a big We Like Your Jib goes out to Lisa Hughes in Dundee, Scotland.
Next up, here's a cheers to Meg in Hinsdale, Illinois.
And a big OHIO
goes
out to Amy in Northwestern Ohio.
And here's a long distance cheers to Roro from Chateau, France. And last but certainly not least, we have Julie 5-star from Pequot Lakes, Minnesota. Everyone we just mentioned went to truecrimegarage.com, helped us out with this week's beer run, and for that, we thank you.
Yeah, BWERUN beer run. Colonel, I don't know if you remember the sunglasses that we got for CrimeCon last year, but I finally found the remaining box that we had, so those are now up on the web store page. Check those out at truecrimegarage.com. Click on the store page, and that's enough of the business.
All right, everybody, gather around, grab a chair, put on your sunglasses, and let's talk some true crime. This is the part, Captain, where we really start to dig in and really uncover a lot of very questionable material that I think is going to lead us to have other questions about this James Dean Worley. So on Thursday, July 21st, and for the next few days after, we have police on the scene. They are going to be combing through James Worley's home and 3-acre rural property. So he's got outbuildings. You could call them a barn or barns, but he has outbuildings on this large property. This is located on County Road 6 in Delta, Ohio, which again is in Fulton. So this is about 6 miles away from Metamora. They raided this home, raided the property, and searched it. An FBI task force arrived at the home on that Thursday, the 21st, and they noted that James Worley seemed to be upset that they had returned. He had an aggressive demeanor. He allowed them into his home. You know, that's what the reports say, but really, what choice does he have if they have warrants to search the property?
Right.
So he takes some of the investigators out to the barn where he has what he refers to as his workshop. And we do know that he did work out of his home for some time. And that is, he's licensed to do so. And he operated some kind of shop out of this barn at one time. He also had like a haul away business where he would drive a truck and haul away junk and things like that he had operated for some period of time. Again, from the Toledo Blade, excavators, a dive team, and several law enforcement agencies combed the obscured property, which is largely blocked from view by trees and crops. Searches were conducted in several structures on his property, including the house, garage, barn, trailer, vehicles, and a pond. A dive team and boat were brought in to plumb the pond, and members of law enforcement poured over every inch of the 3-acre property. Now, as the search proceeded, so now we go to Friday, the next day. As the search proceeds, James Worley was arrested for the abduction of Sierra Joggin. She wasn't found at this point, but Sergeant Matthew Smithmeyer of the Fulton County Sheriff's Office wrote a search warrant for his DNA that read, Worley fits the profile of a serial offender and could potentially have additional unknown victims who could have been kept at the above described location. So he would have the address on this paperwork here. Based upon my knowledge and experience, these types of offenders will often keep trophies. So they are looking for not just evidence that he has done something to Sierra. They're also looking for, as he puts it, trophies that Worley may have kept if he did in fact have other victims. What we do know here, Captain, is that no bodies were found on the property. But what was found was absolutely horrific. It's the stuff that would be out of a horror film. Here we're going to be quoting portions of the investigative report on James Worley's case. Officers asked for and received permission from him to collect DNA and fingerprint standards through multiple investigations on his property. They found a hidden compartment in the floor of this barn. Okay, it's referred to in this report as a floor, but it's technically a dirt floor. Okay, the compartment was nearly flush with the dirt floor. The compartment was covered by a piece of wood that measured about 40 inches by 40 inches. The wood had 20 drilled holes that were evenly distributed over the surface of this piece of wood. Removal of the wood revealed a buried chest freezer. The type of freezer that people will usually keep it for if they have a surplus of meat or frozen goods. It's one of those ones you open up from the top.
Right.
So they find this chest freezer buried in the dirt floor of this barn. The interior of the freezer is lined with brown colored carpet. Swabs were collected from each side of the freezer walls. Later, we would learn that those swabs tested positive for human blood. There was a green storage crate in the barn as well that was examined for potential evidence. The crate contained numerous items. Many items had been placed inside this crate in clear plastic bags that were labeled. And so some of these items, Captain, this included a leather mask and bindings, pantyhose, lace and bra, panties, black lace, a dress, Daisy Duke style shorts, white beach dress, a white romper, lace panties, a red skirt, black mini dress, thigh-high socks, thongs, a mask, leggings, pink lace teddy, brown rope, unopened clothesline rope, black lace teddy, which I may have repeated that, and maybe there were two, and some personal hygiene items were also found. They found duct tape with hairs and fiber material on them.
Yeah, this is not good.
This is not stuff you normally find in a barn
No.
or as he described it, his workshop, which then makes you really wonder what the hell kind of work is he doing in his workshop of horrors here.
Well, I was telling you earlier off mic that I was going back and watching Mindhunter for the millionth time. And you have to remember that Ed Kemper, the first conversation that he had with FBI agents, he states that killing to him was a vocation. Mm-hmm. So workshop, is this part of his work?
According to archboldbuckeye.com, citing an affidavit, the freezer was secured from the outside with a ratchet strap. And blood was found on the walls of the hidden room. Here they're referring to this freezer as like a hidden room. Or the other thing too, what they might be referring to here, Captain, I'm a little uncertain, but the way that this barn, I've actually spoke to a deputy that was inside this barn. The way that it was described to me is that there was a portion of the barn, like a back portion, where items were stacked up, almost making a false wall.
Yeah, and this hole in the floor was basically in that room.
In that section.
So I would describe it as like you have a secret room, and within that secret room, you have a secret hidden spot or hidden room in the floor.
So this may be what they're referring to as the hidden room. So they also says along with restraints for holding humans against their will. The freezer is not only buried in the ground, accessible through the top, the lid portion, but it's secured from the outside. So if somebody were to be placed inside this freezer, they can't get out because he's got these ratchet straps locking this freezer up. This freezer wasn't, nice and clean, refrigerator for extra food or anything like that from Costco. This freezer was found buried under the floor of a secret room in his barn and was secured with a strap. And one of the BCI agents stated that the freezer smelled a lot like bleach, like overwhelmingly powerful smell of bleach. Now, what we do know, though, is if he was using bleach to try to hide and eradicate evidence, it wasn't sufficient enough to destroy all traces, because we do know that they found blood, some traces of blood inside this freezer. Authorities also found hidden cameras, including a nanny cam, as well as several pairs of women's underwear, one soaked in blood, and lengths of rope. They found zip ties, a ski mask, pepper spray, firearms, and ammunition. They also found adult diapers, white tube socks, and a tube top, a women's tube top. So some of these items are similar to what was found on Sierra when her body was recovered.
And from the outside, this barn doesn't look
like something that would belong on Leatherface's property.
No, it's not completely condemned or anything.
Right.
It looks like a workshop on somebody's property. Again, maybe that's to keep out. If you keep up outside appearances, it keeps people outside.
Well, and another item here too, Captain, that is of significance. I mean, all these items are, of course, but keep in mind, Worley's prevented from owning firearms due to his previous felony convictions. And so these finding handguns, or what they found was a loaded Smith & Wesson handgun, a rifle with a cartridge in the chamber, and a shotgun. So he's not allowed to have these items right away. These guns were hidden on the property, or described as being hidden on the property. So this is going to further escalate their investigation here, because now they already believe that he's responsible for what happened to Sierra. But on top of that, they're finding evidence at his property that he may have committed other crimes, but at the very least, he's guilty of having these guns that he's not allowed to have. Again, from the Toledo Blade, this is horrific. James Worley described the items he says he bought those items, right? All the weird items, all the women's clothing that we went through. He said that he bought those items online, and he referred to those items as girlfriend stuff. And he was told investigators that he had plans to start filming amateur pornography with women that he might contact on classified websites like Craigslist and Backpage. That he was going to start filming pornography at his workshop, I guess. This is something that we talked about when we looked into this case years ago, and we wanted to circle back and cover this case again because a lot since then has been learned about James Worley. There was a lot of suspicion about him back then, but now we've learned a lot more about James Worley, and because there would later be a trial in this case, we learn a lot specifically about this case and the evidence that they had in this case, that stuff we just simply didn't know when we covered it the first time. But one thing we did talk about was an interaction, a communication that he had with he was required to attend counseling sessions after he was convicted for abducting Robin Gardner. And it's still unclear how this information got out, since it was told to a therapist during the course of treatment, but it might be likely that the therapist reported it because he or she felt that it signified that James Worley was a threat. But anyway, what we did learn is that at some point during the course of that counseling, he had said at one point, quote, learned from each abduction he had done and the next one he was going to bury, end quote.
Well, I also wonder if his mandatory counseling sessions through the court, if the privileges are not the same.
Well, Barry, he did, right? And regardless of what efforts he was going to do to try to conceal his horrible crimes, Sierra was found 1 mile west and 1 mile south from Worley's House of Horrors. So they're going to charge him with aggravated murder. This case moved along very quickly.
Well, they had a lot of evidence against him.
A lot of evidence. He gets a public defender.
Well, he wanted to save some money. So
his reported income is very little. Like he was only making like $1,000 a year for a year or two leading up to this. But it sounds like, remember we had talked about the elderly mother who was moved off to a nursing home at some point. I have to believe that he was living off of her Social Security because she was getting regular payments.
That's a very good possibility.
Worley's lawyer waived the preliminary hearing and a grand jury considered whether to charge him. In August of 2016, he was indicted on 19 counts. So 2 counts of abduction, 4 counts of kidnapping, 2 counts of felonious assault, 2 counts of murder, 2 counts of aggravated murder, 2 counts of aggravated robbery, possession of criminal tools, tampering with evidence, abuse of a corpse, and 2 counts of possessing weapons under disability, meaning as a convicted felon, he was not allowed to own guns. They found guns on the property. He pled not guilty to all 19 charges.
This individual, to me, has a lot of similarities to the bad guy in True Detective Season 1. You have a property.
The Green Man.
Yeah. You have a property that's not owned by him. It's owned by the family. It's kind of out in the middle of nowhere. Like I was telling you, I played gigs up around this location for years, and it was a beautiful drive up to the gigs, but there was something haunting and something a little scary when you're driving roads that you're not aware of your surroundings. There's not houses close together, so you could just be on a stretch of road that's nothing but cornfields. So if you break down or something, where are you going to get help? But you got this property all by himself, essentially. Yeah, his mother was there for a time period, but was she going out into his workshop, quote unquote? And then he also looks similar to the bad guy in True Detective Season 1. Like similar stature. This is not a guy that if he was running after you in a cornfield, would you it's bad news.
Well, and this is how feeble-minded I am, my good friend. There is a delicious, absolutely fantastic brewery called Green Man Brewery. They make some really good beers, but ever since that first season of True Detective, I can't bring myself to drink any of their beer, and their logo looks a little bit like the picture of the drawing when they have the girl who was abducted and got away. And
Yeah, the girl that was chased through the woods
by the green man with spaghetti hair or something like that.
Yeah.
Their logo looks a little bit like that. Now, they've been around since the late 90s. They came before that show, so I don't know if that was the writer's intention of ruining Green Man Brewery, but
yeah, he
he
added
ruined
out
it
for that.
me.
He added out for that brewing company.
Yeah, he ruined it for me. Now, let's
but think about this. And I think this is important, or this is an observation that I think I've made. Please tell me if you agree or disagree. This is not a situation where James knew that Sierra was out there. Chances are it's a beautiful day. It's the reason why she rode her bike to her boyfriend's house. It's a beautiful day. So that's the reason why her boyfriend rode her almost all the way back to her grandparents' house. So on this beautiful day, James decides to take his motorcycle out for a ride as the sun is setting. What's so strange to me is how these monsters, and make no mistake about it, this guy's an absolute monster.
Yeah.
But think about what he was doing. If your buddy called you and said, "Oh, it was a beautiful day yesterday, Colonel, and I jumped on my bike and put my sunglasses on, put my little helmet on, went out for a ride," you'd think, "Oh, that just sounds so nice and peaceful, and your buddy's just trying to live his life to the fullest." And I believe that's probably what James was doing that day. But then he comes across Sierra, and because of his urges or his demented mind, this is what happens. But I think it's important to talk about in the sense of how one action we all can relate to, we can all get behind and go, that's somebody living their life to the fullest. And then, within minutes, that person then turns into a monster just because of they see an opportunity.
Well, we've been doing this a long time. I agree with what you're saying. We've been doing this a long time, and rarely am I shook. And I'm shook in this case because there's some stuff that's pretty scary. I actually think, he didn't abduct Sierra and then bury the freezer in the floor of his barn. He didn't abduct Sierra and then create a hidden room. He didn't abduct a young woman and then have all these girlfriend stuff items that he claims that he has. Some of the terrifying aspects in particular about this case is, to me, he appears to always kind of be looking for a lone and vulnerable female. And how many times did he come across somebody and not act on that? But he did on this occasion, and he did with Robin Gardner.
Well, in a 26-year time span. And I know he was in prison for some of that time span, but
for about 6 years, let's say,
right.
5 to 6 years of that.
How many attacks, how many victims? And because of his job, again, this is very similar to the villain in True Detective, having a job that you roam, and your whereabouts are kind of not known to anybody but you. And because of the line of work, you always have a kill kit on you, because those are the tools that you're going to use for your job.
The other thing that's terrifying about this is the location, okay? Which this is a beautiful part of our state. It really is. But then when you start to apply things that you know about this case, when we hear that it's believed off of the cell phone information that he was at the abduction site for 2 hours, he's there for 2 hours and nobody sees any of this. Nobody sees any of this for about a 2-hour time period. And then he buries her roadside on County Road 7 off of the road, and it's not very far off of the road. It takes a while to try to bury somebody, and he's there, and nobody sees this either. That stuff it really makes you, it really can get you thinking and your imagination going the wrong way when you're out in a place in a rural area like this. Summer is just around the corner, and the folks at Mint Mobile have a hot take. Getting a summer bod is out, and getting your savings bod is in. This spring and summer, everyone wants skimpy wireless bills and fat wallets. And with premium wireless plans for just $15 a month, you can have both without breaking a sweat or the bank. All plans come with high-speed data and unlimited talk and text, delivered on the nation's largest 5G network. I, like everyone else, used to have the big-name wireless service providers, but that came with an inflated monthly bill. With Mint Mobile, I get that same quality and reliable service with a nice fit and trim monthly bill. This year, skip breaking a sweat and breaking the bank. Get your summer savings and shop premium wireless plans at mintmobile.com/TCG. That's mintmobile.com/TCG. Upfront payment of $45 for a 3-month 5GB plan required, equivalent to $15 per month. New customer offer for the first 3 months only, then full price plan options available. Taxes and fees extra. See Mint Mobile for details.
Now's the time for a great deal on a new Honda. It's time to take an adventure with rugged capability and commanding style. Check out the Honda Ridgeline, Pilot, Passport, or CR-V. For a limited time, well-qualified buyers can get a 1.99% APR on a 2025 Ridgeline or a 3.99% APR on a 2025 Pilot, 2026 Passport, or 2025 CR-V.
See dealer for financing details.
All right, we are back. Cheers, mates. Talk hands in the air. Cheers to you, Colonel.
Cheers to you, Captain. You will be happy to know when we get to the trial, the evidence against this monster is overwhelming, to say the least. So we're not going to go through everything, and we'll go through some of the highlights here, but you'll be happy to know that there was a couple weeks ago, we had a case that we were talking about. I believe it was a case where there's an arrest. So you could call it a solved case or a closed case if you want. But we had a Jensen in that case, and I think what we need is more Jensens in the world and in these true crime stories, because it seems like where there's a Jensen, there's an arrest. So in this case, we have Joseph Jensen, an FBI agent who worked on the cellular analysis survey team up in Detroit, Michigan. He was the one that could place James Worley with Sierra through the cell phone records. And he told the jury that Sierra's Verizon records and Worley's Sprint records showed they were in the same location in the cornfield, at the same location on his property, and at the same location where they eventually find her body. Worley got a call at 7:43 p.m. when he was in the cornfield. So that would be at the abduction scene. I really want to know who called him, and we can get into that on off the record and some speculation that I have in this case and some others as well.
It could just be a job, because
it could be a nothing. Yeah.
Right. Somebody calling him to see if he can pick up trash somewhere.
I got 20 spam calls yesterday, so who knows? But Agent Jensen told the jury that the phones were in the same general area of each other at the same time. So that is huge evidence there. But of course, we also know that Worley's and Sierra's, both of their DNA was found on that motorcycle helmet. Sierra's in the form of blood. A partial palm print from Worley was also on the helmet. The theory of the prosecution team, based on the evidence uncovered during the investigation, was that Worley was on his motorcycle when he passed Sierra on her bike. Then he goes up ahead and he hid himself and the motorcycle potentially in the corn. And when she bikes by, he runs out and attacks her, shoving her off of the bike, hitting her several times in the head with his helmet, knocking her out. He left the helmet by the roadside where it was later recovered by the farmer. And then Worley took Sierra into the cornfield. Again, he's there for a period of time, somehow incapacitates her and rode his bike home after dark only to return in his truck, probably to pick her up and transport her back to the hidden room in his barn. Worley's DNA was found on the sunglasses he dropped at the abduction site.
What about the screwdriver?
That's a good question. What we do know
I do believe it was his screwdriver, but I can't find anywhere that they were able to link that to him.
Not only did they find Sierra's bike in the corn stalks, they also found blood on the corn stalks. Remember when we went through that scene?
Right.
And then they made a determination that they found Sierra's blood in his barn on his property. So the evidence is...
Yeah, but of course this monster is going to say, well, I'm innocent. This was all planted. Well, who was it planted by, James? Well, it must have been the police.
They found a rubber glove on County Road 7. This would be near where they recovered her body, and it had both Worley's and Sierra's DNA on it. They found a piece of duct tape, and it had both of their DNA on it. This is about as open and shut a case can get. I mean, when you're at trial, I'm surprised. This is murder, and we read through the 19 charges that they brought against him, and they did openly mention that there was going to be a threat of the death penalty here. And so when you compare this to previous charges and other cases where he did plead guilty, it makes sense that he wasn't going to do so here. But the amount of evidence against this guy does not make it very difficult for the jury to come to a conclusion that this guy is the person he's responsible for what happened to this beautiful young woman. And of course, the guilt, they find him guilty as hell on all counts.
I don't know if you have this information, but I think it was at the sentencing maybe that Worley spoke on his behalf to claim that he's innocent. Mm-hmm. And when he ended up calling her, saying that she was a beautiful young woman or whatever, he said that her whole family walked out of the courtroom.
Yeah, they got tired of hearing him talk, and tired of hearing him defend himself, and probably sick to their stomach when he referred to her as a beautiful young woman or whatever he said. I purposely left that out of my notes because it just disgusted me as well, because when we're talking about this guy who clearly abducts women, and then there's a torture element to it for him that just sickens me. And this guy, he's really like a ugly, sloppy version of Ted Bundy. I mean, the Blitzkrieg attack, very similar stuff here that we saw with Ted Bundy and some other individuals that we've reviewed here in the garage. Now, a little bit of history on him. I purposely included the dates of his sentencing on the previous times that he had been locked up, at least the month of when he was locked up and the month when he was released, because I really believe, and I know that law enforcement believe the same, and I'm sure Sierra's family and Josh's family believe the same. This guy is a serial, it's proven in court that he's a serial offender. This guy's a serial killer. I have no doubt about it. No doubt in my mind that he is responsible for other victims. In fact, part of his claim that he was framed involves another victim. There's a young woman who went missing. So Claudia Tinsley goes missing in 1996. James Worley was questioned by police over her disappearance. This young woman has never been found, and they question him about her disappearance. She's never been found. And his claim that they framed me was that, they couldn't prove that I killed Claudia Tinsley. So when Sierra Joggin ended up, when somebody did this to Sierra Joggin, they pinned it on me because all these years they've thought that I was guilty of murdering Claudia Tinsley. And the way that story works out, he's the last person seen with this woman who is never seen again. It had something to do with the license plate. I don't know if Claudia's mother wrote down the license plate or if Claudia wrote down the license plate, but there was something about a license plate. That's how they tracked down this Worley guy, because Claudia's mother is like, yeah, the last time I saw her, she was leaving with this guy in a car, and she didn't know who the guy was. They tracked this license plate. It's a rented vehicle. When they talk to the rental company, they're like, yeah, this James Dean Worley guy had rented the vehicle for that day or for that time period when Claudia goes missing. So it's pretty clear that he may have been the last person to see this woman that's never been heard from again.
Like I said, the tough thing about this individual is his work. When you can't, he's not checking into a factory every day. He's basically roaming around. And what have these killers taught us, or straight from the horse's mouth, what have they told us? That they go hunting. And so this monster had a job that allowed him to do so. Who knows how many, and maybe his brother would know where, was he just working up in the northwest part of Ohio, or is he roaming the whole state? Is he roaming multiple states?
The brother, as I understand it, I think he's got some disabilities, so I'm not certain what he would know, but you are bringing up, there is some speculation that if he had help, there are very smart people, very dialed in people that have awareness of these cases and insights on these cases that I've spoke to and say on one or two of these, he may have had some kind of help. And there's a friend of Worley's that he was close to that people suspect if he did have help, it would have either been the brother or the friend. And because of the brother's disabilities, he may not have understood what his brother was, kind of forcing him to help him do. Another individual that I'm concerned that Worley's probably responsible is Joanne Jasso. She was reported missing in December of 1983 by her family. On December 13th, 1983, a Fulton County deputy was flagged down by County Road 11 near the intersection of County Road 11 and County Road F. After this individual found a nude body of a female lying in a ditch. This body was later identified as Joanne Jasso, and this area, Captain, is Delta, Ohio. You had referenced, well, he's not going and checking in or clocking in every day, and he wasn't. You're right. At the time when he killed Sierra, no, he could roam, and that is some scary business. In 1983, when this young woman was killed, he was clocking in. He was working on a large farm in Delta, Ohio, in this area, so close to where her body was found.
Right.
He was working there at that time. And I think that 1983, had technology been different back then, they could have connected this case to Worley, and then to further along this suspicion that this guy is a serial killer. I had a phone call earlier this week with a seasoned detective with Toledo PD. So I'm on the phone with him regarding a whole nother matter. And that other matter was the Porchlight Project did some DNA work for Toledo PD, and we were able to identify this young woman who it's been unknown who she was. She was a Jane Doe since the late 80s. And so I'm talking to him about that case, and I happened to mention to him, I said, you guys, do you have anything that physical evidence that could be tested in relationship to James Worley. I barely got the word Worley out of my big mouth before the detective goes, that guy, Nick, is a serial killer. We know it. He goes, everybody up here knows it. Everybody up here knows it. Just some of those cases are old. Some of them we don't have evidence. One thing that complicates matters in this area as well, when we start to look at James Worley and really put him under the microscope, is there was another serial killer operating in this area in 1980, 1981. The Cook brothers were committing similar crimes to what I suspect James Worley is guilty of. And so that makes things a little difficult when you try to look at this. But the doctors, people much smarter than I, Captain, diagnosed this guy as James Worley as a sexual sadist, saying he has sexual sadism disorder, meaning he has a compulsion and obsession and really gets off on the suffering and harming other people.
Yeah, that's why he had a secret room and a secret room inside of that. I mean, it's basically a torture chamber. And I think one of the difficult things for law enforcement will be is the location. Yes, this barn and the farm in which he lived on, owned by his mother, was out in the middle of nowhere, but it's a stone throw away from Toledo, not that far away from Ann Arbor, not that far away from Bowling Green, Tiffin or Findlay, Ohio.
And you're exactly right. I would be looking at all of these locations because in the Tinsley case, she's last seen in the company of James Worley. Once they track that license plate in that rental car to him, and then they show the picture to Tinsley's mother, she's like, yeah, that's the guy. That's the guy that was with my daughter. And that he picked her up in Toledo, Ohio. So while he lived out in the country, he would venture everywhere. And like you had said earlier and keep pointing out, rightfully so, is that for a period of time, he's driving around. You know, he's working a job that has him moving about in this general area of all of Northwest Ohio and then parts of Southern Michigan. He does, thankfully. You know, I don't want to get into a death penalty debate. I can agree with people that think that it's wrong. I can agree with people that think that it's right. In this case, I have no problem with the state of Ohio killing a man like James Worley. I have no problem with them ending his life specifically. So he does get the death penalty. He gets convicted of this horrible, horrific murder. Again, there's suspicion of what else he could be responsible for. Everybody in Northwest Ohio that knows about James Dean Worley, that knows about the Sierra jogging case, they all share the same question. How many more cases of abducted women is James Worley responsible for? A lot of time elapsed between when he abducted Robin Gardner and when he abducted Sierra. And what about before the attempt on Robin? We do know, according to the records, that Worley made reference to each abduction when he spoke with the therapist after the 1990 case. He was 31 years old when he abducted or attempted to abduct Robin Gardner. What about all those years prior to that incident when he was in his prime offending years? We can only speculate who or what Worley was actually talking about when he said each abduction. He had learned from each abduction.
Well, it sucks too because we can't make this guy talk. We can't.
I need to give another shout out here to some people that helped us out with this case. Our good friends up at WTOL. They do the news up in the greater Toledo area. We have Brian Duggar, we've become friends through the Porchlight Project and through Nancy Eagleson's case. He does brilliant investigative work for WTOL. He also helped us with the Clark and Straub case out of this same area. And he put me in touch with Melissa Andrews, who is now an anchor. She does the news up there, and she was in communication with James Worley after he was convicted and while he was on death row. And unfortunately, due to circumstances here in the state of Ohio and the temporary shutdown of the death penalty here, he's not been executed yet. In fact, it's not by accident that we are circling around to this case once again on this date, because he was due to be executed this week by the state of Ohio. But because there's a temporary hold on that, his execution date is now undetermined. But he was in communication with Melissa Andrews, and they traded letters, and she has been the only person that he has granted an interview to. And you can go on YouTube and find that interview that she did with James Worley. And he doesn't, like the captain said, he doesn't admit to anything. He doesn't admit to anything. And he's not talking about these other cases that we suspect him of. I was in a way hoping that as this execution date got closer and closer, maybe he would start to spill some of his dirty secrets to the world, perhaps giving some families the resolution they so desperately need before he goes straight to hell.
I want to thank everybody for joining us here in the garage each and every week. And thanks for telling your mother, and thanks for telling your brother. Colonel, do we have any recommended reading for the beautiful listeners?
This week, Captain, not so much reading, but if you want to do some reading, you can go to the website and read up on their vision, their mission, their fundraising efforts, and their history. Please go to KOGSafe.com. That stands for KeepOurGirlsSafe.com. Longtime listeners of this show know that we've talked about KeepOurGirlsSafe.com in the past. They are an advocate, education, and empowerment group, nonprofit organization in Northwest Ohio that was brought about because of the unfortunate case, the Sierra case. And they put together efforts to educate, advocate, and empower women to fight back. Fortunately, they are rare, but unfortunately, they do exist, these monsters that abduct women. This is a group that is empowering women to fight back, to get away. They do self-defense classes. They have self-defense gear that you can get. And a group that we were happy to partner with back in February earlier this year to raise some money for their great efforts and all the good work that they are doing. So if you want to learn more, please go to KOGSafe.com. Once again, that is Keeping Our Girls Safe.
And until next week, be good, be kind,
and don't litter.
Now's the time for a great deal on a new Honda. It's time to drive smarter with high-tech features and excellent reliability. Check out the Honda Civic, Accord, or HR-V. For a limited time, well-qualified buyers can get a 4.99% APR on a 2025 Civic or a 3.99% APR on a 2025 Accord or HR-V.
See dealer for financing details. Exclude Civic SI and Type R.